International news now. Americans are expected to cast their ballots today in the midterm elections. Joe Biden's leadership in the past 2 years, as well as key issues, including the global economic crisis, reproductive rights and gun control laws, will be at the forefront of voters' minds. So let's find out what we can expect from today's elections and, of course, the results as well. The director at the African Center for the Study of the United States, that's at the University of Pretoria, Professor Christopher Isike, joins us via our video link this morning. Prof, great to have you with us on the program. It really is a referendum, isn't it, on the first half of Joe Biden's term as president?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Good morning to you and your viewers, and thank you for having me. Yes, indeed, midterm elections in the United States are usually a referendum on the incumbent president, and this will not be any different from the past.
Prof, Republicans, apparently, according to polling, have quite a strong chance of taking back the House in these midterms. I mean, if that happens, effectively they'll run every committee. They'll decide which bills come to the floor.
Yes. Like we said, historically, the odds favor the Republicans, historically, because, like I said before, midterms are usually a referendum on the incumbent president, and President Biden's approval rating is very low at the moment. It's currently at 41% amongst American voters and 43% amongst registered voters. And even if you look at the Democratic candidates, they are all outperforming President Biden by at least 5 points among registered voters. So that's why we say the odds favor Republicans. And from what, like you said, the polls show that, in terms of people's certainty to vote, Republicans continue to be more certain about voting, with 80% of them, saying that they are certain to vote or have already done so. This is slightly higher than the 74% that the Democrats leaning voters have. So the odds do favor the Republicans. But again, voting behavior is something that is very difficult to predict accurately. There could still be a surprise that the Democrats can swing it.
There have been a few Democratic presidents over the years that have actually gained seats in the midterms. But given everything that we've just discussed so far, it seems highly unlikely for Joe Biden. It's unlikely, but there's still a possibility, because a lot of things are on the ballot, at stake. One of them is the control of the Senate and Congress, like you said, which if the Republicans will give President Biden a torrid time in the last 2 years, make him a sitting duck president effectively. The economy is also at stake, very high inflation and cost of living. But one big issue that is at stake, which may sway Democrats to come out and vote, is the question of abortion rights, and that's very important to them. And of course, the message that the president has been preaching with his former President Obama in the last couple of weeks, the fact that democracy is at stake. 2 years after the 2020 elections, the polls still show that more than 1 in 3 adults say that they are not confident President Biden was legitimately elected, and that includes more than 7 in 10 Republicans. So, in effect, Trump is on the ballot. So that can be something that can, gear more Democrats to come out and vote. And if they do, they show up, if they turn up, there's a possibility that Democrats may take it. Yeah, so the issues that they've been campaigning on both sides, really echoing previous elections, right? As you said, the Democrats going with abortion rights, gun control, climate change, Republicans focusing on the economy, the high cost of living, and, of course, immigration. Immigration
as well, yes.
Yeah. So what does this say? You've talked about Trump being on the ballot. Depending on how things go with these midterms, what does it say about the road to 2024?
And this is why it's important that Trump is on the ballot, because the message that Biden has been preaching is the fact that, we cannot have
U.S. where democracy seems to be on the decline, with attack on democratic rights, people's rights, and the fact that we're talking about the battle between facts and the big lie that Trump has perpetuated, which has actually affected voter confidence, election integrity in the country. All of them have significance for democratic consolidation in the United States. If you look at the 5 key contest states where you have Republicans and Democrats running head to head, all we're talking about Wisconsin, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, Nevada, you even add Florida and Ohio, you'll find that all the Republican candidates there that are head to head with Democrats are all backed by Donald Trump, and they are all election denialists, and they have actually gained traction as a result of that. So this is a big problem for the United States, especially given the example it tends to want to set to the world in terms of democracy.
I was actually going to ask you that as my next question, Prof, and you've already answered it in part, but what are the key states to watch in these midterms?
Well, it depends. All 435 seats in the House of Representatives, the Congress, are up for grabs. They're in play. But in the Senate, there are about 35 seats that are being contested. And there are 5 or 6 key states, like I said, where we need to watch. The most famous we've seen on the media has been the one in Georgia, where you have 2 African Americans, Herschel Walker of the Republican Party and Raphael Warnock of the Democrats, who is the incumbent. You also have to look at, in Pennsylvania one, where you have Dr. Mehmet Oz, Republican, Trump-backed, and John Fetterman, Democrat, who was far ahead until he, had a stroke and did a comeback. When many people expected him to withdraw from the race, but he's still neck with also that. Those are 2 key states. You also want to look at Nevada, where you have Adam Lassalt, Republican, who's also a big election denialist, and then the current incumbent, Catherine Cortez Masto. So those are some of the key states that we want to look at. Arizona as well. So these states are very crucial, but the projections are, if the polls happen to be correct, that the Republicans may be able to nick the 1 additional vote they need to control Senate. But that is if any of these results I just mentioned, just one of them go in their favor and they keep what they already have.
The political polarization in the U.S. still at its peak, one might argue.
Yes, and this is why this election is very important. It's very different from past midterm elections. The polarization is deep. It's still on. The American society is largely divided. If you look at the issues at play in the elections, the parties are evenly matched in terms of the different issues that they concern themselves with. Like you said earlier, the Republicans are concerned with the economy, the high cost of living and inflation. But this is something that Democrats are also concerned about as well. There are Democrats that are saying that why the president is focused too much on democracy, which some will say is the bigger picture issue, they are much more bothered about the bread and butter issues of the day. But then they forget that most of the bread and butter issues, the inflation, for example, was caused by the grants that were paid to them by the government, in the early part of 2021, which flooded the economy with a lot of money. Apart from, of course, big companies increasing costs and profits unnecessarily, to aggravate the inflation problems. But so the economy is one area where both of them are tied. But in terms of abortion rights, Democrats are concerned about that. Immigration is something that the Republicans are concerned about. So these issues divide them squarely, depending on which side you're standing on. But I think that the swing factor, again, an important swing factor that most people have not looked at, are independent voters. So the question will be where they decide to swing to this time, and what issues they care most about among the litany of issues at stake in this midterm elections.
Yeah, absolutely. And one might think that the bread and butter issues, as you say, will dominate their decision on how they vote in these midterms. Professor Christopher Isike, let me thank you for your time this morning, for your analysis as the U.S. Goes to the polls for the midterm elections. Prof. Isike is the Director of African Studies for the Center of the U.S., for the Study of the U.S., at the University of Pretoria. Still to come.